Communication. We probably heard it all before, right? Communication is the key to a successful relationship. I'm sure people are even tired of hearing that, maybe even starting not to believe it. Well, what do we mean when we say that? That communication is the key to a successful relationship? Well, Kaitlin and I, Coach Kaitlin, and me, Coach Simon, are going to discuss the kind of communication that actually works in relationships and dating and life, and the kind of communication that doesn't work, because it isn't as simple as communication is the key to a successful relationship. Perhaps there's a lot more to it that involves the kind of communication and whether or not it's a two-way street or a one-way street. So Kaitlin, you'll be able to catch the post as we'll share the recording later. All right, Kaitlin, you on? Do I see her? She's coming. There she is. Just adjust.
Hi, Simon.
Hey, Kaitlin.
That was a nice welcome with that sound. Thank you.
What was this? Just creaking and cracking going on around here? My bad. Welcome
So
to
communication.
We should have a name for this. I feel like
I know, that'd be fun.
like Coach's Corner or something like that.
Ooh, I like that.
Talking coach communication and how coaches talk about love and relationships, and to give you guys an inside scoop of how we feel about these topics and offer you some opportunity to discover something for yourself.
Yeah. Thanks for joining in. So fun. So communication is what we are covering. And Simon, I like what you pointed out there about it's not just any communication. So I'm curious how you define healthy communication or what that means to you.
Well, it's so funny to me because for a long time, I thought it was just communication, talk. Talking is good. You should talk in relationships. So I would say I got pretty good at talking. Now, the challenge with that is I also got good at not checking in to see who was listening. I also got pretty good at not checking to see what the other person had to share. I became like this verbally skilled person who could share what he wanted to share, but wasn't even checking in to see, is it landing for the other person? And I think that's how a lot of people view communication in relationships. It's just talking. Oh, we need to talk more. Well, how do we talk to each other? And what if that talking just ends up being one person is talking most of the time and the other person just feels totally unseen? And so when I start to think about the communication that works, it's a two-way street where what I'm sharing is actually landing for people, they're actually hearing it, and what they're sharing, I'm actually hearing. It's like a dance together. That's back and forth. So what are your thoughts on communication that works, doesn't work? What do you think of when you listen?
I like what you said there. I remember this quote from Harriet Lerner. She talks about listen to the same amount that you want to be heard, which I think is really interesting because we always sometimes want to talk and get our point across, but then we're not actually listening with the same type of energy or the same type of intention, right? So I think with healthy communication, you're right. It's sometimes we can say things that don't really need to be said sometimes. Sometimes we need to work on that on our own. And I feel lately we've swung so far this way that we're oh, we have to express everything. We have to get it all out on the table. And you can't keep anything in. It has to be all out, right? And I think that's also swung too far the other way. But really, it's in intentional communication, right? Of what is my intention behind this conversation, or what needs to be kind of spoken between us that we're not actually talking about that might allow us both to feel safe, seen, and understood in this process.
I think that's the X factor to point out that you just said right there. What is the intention? And I think most of us aren't even asked that question, so we don't really know what that means, or we haven't even considered that there's an intention behind what I'm doing. I just had a coaching call with the May group just 15 minutes ago, and we finish every call, and first of all, we start every call by asking, what's your intention for the call? And we finish every call by asking, what's your intention between now and our next conversation? So that now you're actually in the driver's seat of what you're there to do. But it takes some practice, because when I ask people this, they aren't sure what their intention is.
Mm-hmm.
They might say something like, I want to be really honest. And I say, well, what's your intention behind being honest? You just want to be honest for the sake of being honest? That's not really an intention.
Mm-hmm.
You want to be honest because you're hoping it's going to build connection? Oh, okay. I want to be honest because I'm hoping that it'll create a space of honesty for my partner or my mom or my friend. Okay, now we see your intention. And when we have that intention, we can actually filter through the communication to see if it's actually working or not.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's no intention, if it's just to communicate, well, we can't really measure that against anything. We don't even know if it's working or not, because we might just think communication is just talking.
Yeah. Yeah, and that brings up a good first step I would consider in healthy communication is checking in with yourself about it, right? Is this something that like I need to work through on my own, or is this something like I want to work on with this person? And it's again seeing what the intention is, right? If my intention is I want to teach them a lesson, I don't think that that's really that, that love over fear, fear over love concept that we talk about a lot in our program. That sounds like a very fear-based, not aligned intention.
Yeah, sometimes my intention is to prove people wrong.
Yeah.
For sure.
We're humans, right?
Yeah. And here's the funny thing, it really takes something to admit that in the moment. Like when we're doing it, when we're actually trying to prove someone wrong, it's so difficult to actually say that that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. And when you're proving someone wrong, where does that leave you and you're listening?
Always disconnected, and I'm listening for where I'm right and where they're wrong.
Yeah.
So they've got no chance with me whatsoever.
Yeah. And you can imagine, especially in partnership and friendships, if I'm trying to make you wrong and I'm right, that's not very connecting, or it doesn't create closeness. If anything, that creates more distance.
Well, it just sucks. Like we all know that feeling of being with a friend or family member or partner where you just feel like they're trying to be like have power over me. They're trying to prove me wrong, and you just like you want to get out of there. You feel judged. You feel just discomfort. You feel like you're in the wrong place or that you're wrong as a person. It's a terrible feeling.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that's like a really key piece around noticing where your intention lies, what's your agenda, and even giving yourself some time. Like I find like we're so quick to react lately. Like maybe just take like, a day and see what's actually there for you. Because like we talk about a lot is we make meaning out of things, right? Or what is actually real versus what is our projection of what we're making it about us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so many ways we can go about this. We could do an entire 12-week course on communication.
Sure.
But I think just as you were riffing right now, something that comes up for me is this differentiation or distinction between, is this for me to deal with, or is there something for me to communicate with someone else so that we can deal with it together? Yeah. And we have an exercise in our program called the unquenchable thirst. And the unquenchable thirst is to help us distinguish real needs in relationship that are genuine between you and another person, and those needs that can only be satisfied by yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think what you said touches a huge topic in today's world, which is I think many of us are acting as if the needs that I need to satiate in myself are someone else's responsibility. Mm-hmm. Like my insecurity is your fault.
Yes.
My
trigger is your fault.
It's you that are making me feel this way. Now we're not trying to say that there aren't impacts on each other. Yeah. But I think we could all agree that everyone would be better off if we were able to look in the mirror and take responsibility for ourselves in bigger ways. That benefits everyone. Benefits ourselves personally, and it benefits everyone else. Because if how I feel and my mood is completely dictated on how you treat me, I have no power over my life experience.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah. That is.
And so this is what we see. I think we see people exert power over each other going, you have to treat me this way or else. It's like,
Yeah.
that doesn't make for a very workable relationship. Still a
And
space in
yeah,
there.
even on a day-to-day basis, right? If you're dependent on external factors all the time, that's like a really tricky space to be in,
It's brutal.
right? Yeah, right. And I like what you say there. It's like how do you make sure like your cup is full or your needs are met in a way that allows you to actually show up in dynamics and in spaces that are in alignment with your truth or like what you're actually about, rather trying to get someone else to fill up your cup and then you're showing up depleted and not and dependent on an external factor.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's not to say we don't get things from each other
Of
and can
course.
fill each other's cup up in lots of different ways. But if it's all based off of another person, it's a very powerless experience. And I think many people are experiencing that because I think a lot of us, myself included, hadn't been trained on how to take a new level of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I got into deep works of coaching that I started to discover the power that I had in myself. Because I, like most people, was walking around like somebody should do something about this.
Yeah.
Somebody did this to me. Somebody's causing this. And I felt like that just was the way it was. It's just the way it is. And it wasn't until I got into coaching where I started to see, oh, I have power over that. I have power over any interaction that I have, over my past, the way my family, the way I felt betrayed by my family, and all of a sudden you start to just experience a whole new sense of well-being and freedom and courage, which is totally what we're advocating here in all the work that we're doing.
Yeah, it's so yeah, it's so true. It's like how that responsibility for ourself can really be a game changer in so many different areas of our life. And sometimes we can't even see it when we're so far in it, where we're just kind of, yeah, our blind spots, whatever you want to call it, that we're not actually, life is happening to us. We're not actually living it in the way that we want to.
Hence the purpose of coaching, you guys, to help you see those
Yes.
blind spots. Both me and Kaitlin are working with people to support us with that. We are very, very well trained in this stuff, but we also recognize I got my perspectives that are limited.
Yeah. Yep.
I got my
Totally.
version of the world that I think is the world, and then there's other stuff going on that I'm not even aware of.
Yeah. So true. And Simon, I'm curious because, like, obviously, communication and being responsible and all these things. How would you? I get this a lot with clients around dating and communication. When you're first dating someone and getting to know them, yeah, what are,
Yeah.
I find that like a lot of people are looking for these scripts or
Yeah.
these things, or what do you see there?
Well, I'm just laughing because of how intensified the rules have gotten.
I know, right? You got to follow those
There's
rules.
there's so many rules about the time in between dates, in between texts, what you should talk about, what you shouldn't talk about, hunting for red flags. Like all this stuff is so intense and robs us of the fact, like, I'm on a date with a
Yeah.
possibly interesting person. I didn't even
Yeah,
notice
turning
that.
into a job interview, right? Like,
Yeah, and I think a lot of people can relate to the job interview experience of dating, and that's just
yeah,
sucks. I mean, think about think about any job interviews you had. The best part of that job wasn't the interview.
no.
Now imagine that dating. It's like, okay, I've got all this pressure to be perfect, and I've seen it. I mean, I've seen people in coaching tell me about a great date that they went on,
Yep.
and then one person did one little thing that they didn't like, and they canceled that person.
Yeah.
Like, that's not a way to date.
Yeah. Yep.
You're not dating for connection, you're dating for perfection.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to work. So that's one side of the spectrum. And then the other side of the spectrum is dating as if I'm not good enough. Dating to prove my worth.
Like cracking the code. If I can figure this out, then that means that I'm worthy of love.
If I can say the right thing and be
Yeah.
as charismatic or charming as I can be, and they like me, then I'm good enough. And that is exhausting. That person then ends up doing that for their whole relationship with that person.
Yeah.
And it's so painful. It's exhausting. And I think that's a lot of what you and I are working on with people, is to be able to find that sweet spot, because it's a spectrum that's very polarized. There's like this righteous perfectionist, everything's got to be this particular way, and then there's this, I don't deserve anything, I'm not good enough, I have to prove it. Neither of those actually work.
Yeah.
They're very unfulfilling.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like this idea of check boxes versus having standards for yourself, right? If you if you think consistency is important for you in communication, for example, that's okay for you to want that. It's just where we cut it like so short. We don't even give it the opportunity without communicating what's there, right? Or what we actually want.
Yeah.
And that's a
Saw this
great way
today
to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah. Just fear-based.
Yeah.
I saw this today on the group call. We're talking about
Yep.
family. And this person who's been disconnected with her family, and she misses them. She misses the connection. And I was just asking her, how would you like it to be? And she said, oh, well, I can't change it. I mean, they are the way they are. And I was like, that wasn't the question. The question was, how would you like it to be? And she's like, well, we have such a history, and oh man, I couldn't even imagine trying to start something new with this group in the family. And again, she's not answering the question. This is how much we're stuck in our brain patterns, you guys. Like, we are so stuck in brain patterns, we don't even realize it. Literally, it's happening live right in front of us. And you probably do this too. We ask, do you remember the question I asked you? Because they don't.
No.
They're so caught up in their own story about their life and their family that they didn't even hear the question.
Mm-hmm.
And so I asked again for the third time, how would you like it to be? She goes, well, I just really want us to be connected. We used to laugh all the time. We used to laugh and have such a joyful time with each other. And now it's just intense and tough. And all of a sudden, she started to open her perspective up to what she wanted. And this is how we started to shift momentum, you guys, to put our attention on what we desire. We've gotten way too good at putting our attention on what we don't like.
Yes.
Which breeds more of what we don't like, because that's all we're thinking about, so we're focused on. That's why that hunting for red flags thing is so terrible, because you will find them.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't, you'll make them up.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit for people who want to see what communication works. When you think about communication that works, what is part of that? You mentioned having an intention behind it. That's huge. That's a huge part of it.
Yep.
Working. What else creates communication that works?
Replacing judgment with curiosity.
Curiosity is, oh man.
So leading with curiosity. And I find too, it's like seek to understand versus seeking to disagree or seek to go against.
And
right.
By the way, what I love about that too is seek to understand. You can understand someone without having to agree with them.
100%. Right.
But a lot of people don't get that. Like you and I, that's 100%. That's super obvious. But most of us think, if I got to listen to you, then that means you're going to think I agree with you. And I do not agree with you.
Yes.
So I'm not going to listen to you. And then now we are where we are.
Yeah. And I say that to my clients all the time, that idea of validation, right? Just because you validate how they're feeling or what they're experiencing doesn't necessarily mean that you agree with the reaction or agree with what they're saying, right? But it's like they are having that experience that is in their lens. Yeah. And that doesn't mean that you have to go against your values or like jump on board and forget what you were about. It's more about holding, like you said in the beginning, this safe space to have a really nice conversation of what's there.
So setting an intention,
Yep.
being curious, giving yourself permission that you can understand someone without having to agree with them.
Yep.
Anything else you see?
What else? I always like to, remind clients about the yeah but. Have you heard about that one? Where
Give me some more
so
context.
someone will be talking about their experiencing and you'll be communicating what's there. And then you'll be like, yeah, I understand, but I
Uh-huh.
still da 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 da. Right. So like, those tricky pieces where it's like that I'm sorry, but you see how it doesn't land the same. So just like noticing our language that we're
Yep.
using while we're communicating. The yeah, but's a huge one. Right.
Yeah. Me and my wife had one of those yesterday.
Oh, nice. How did it work out?
It was great. It was messy and then it got great, but it was messy first. Yeah. So this is how it works. So um, I was telling her about my day, and she was having a shower, and so I was like around the corner in the bathroom, and our son, who's almost 11 months old, was in the bedroom that is all like walled off and safe, but there's things that he can grab and whatnot. And so we're talking, checking on him every few minutes, checking on him every few minutes, and then I go around and I see he's like sucking on like a paper box, and
Yep.
the paper box is ripped. And so it's a big enough piece that he's not going to choke on it, but inside is a bottle of some liquid, and it's obviously the kind
Mm,
of thing that you have like drops of. So if he was to ingest a whole bunch of it, that would not be good.
yeah.
And so I got scared, and I said to my wife, maybe we shouldn't put these liquids down here.
Mm,
And she heard, I'm not doing a good enough job as a mother.
mm,
And so
yeah.
she was upset because she was like, why are you telling me to do this right now? And she, by the way, already that whole day she'd been taking care of our son much more than I was. I had things going on and work going on. She was picking up the slack big time.
Yeah.
And so she was frustrated with me giving this comment as if I was critiquing what she was and
Mm,
wasn't doing.
yeah.
And I was looking at it like, I was just trying to help. I just think it's a good idea that we don't put something there. And so this is a perfect example of how she heard one thing, I had one intention, but my intention didn't land. And
Mm,
so
yeah.
as she started to get defensive, I started to get defensive
Mm-hmm.
because I wanted my son to be safe. Here's the irony. So does she,
Mm-hmm.
right? But
Yeah.
the wires were crossed. And so we were both frustrated. So we took some space. Now this is what the win is for me. That kind of separation or fight would last a really long time for me in the past.
Yeah.
And for us now, it's like 5 or 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
We take a pause because we're both triggered. We're both have our nervous system activated,
Yeah.
right?
Flooding. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And both of our nervous systems, our number one reaction is fight. Both of us. And so we paused. We took a moment.
Oh, sorry,
You
Simon.
still hear me?
Yeah, you cut out there. There you go.
Yeah. So we paused. We took a moment, and I said, "What happened? Like, what did you hear?" And she told
Mm-hmm.
me, she was like, you were critiquing me about parenting. And in my mind, I was like, no, I wasn't. I was thinking about just moving this thing. And so I heard her, but here's the thing. I said the yeah, but thing. And it was a perfect example of how it doesn't work, but how it naturally just kind